We shouldn't be fighting the same war that our grandmothers had to fight, our great-grandmothers had to fight.
Nothing has changed. What are we supposed to do? Nothing has changed.
You can't sleep at night until you know that they're home in the house, because you never know.
I am afraid because, if I go outside, then something will happen to me or my family.
You cannot insulate them, because at some point, they're going to come face to face with the reality of their blackness.
This is a time that this generation just really is saying, no, I'm tired of it.
We have to stand united. Don't you all give up.
When you watch your big brother, who you looked up to your whole entire life, die begging for his mom, I'm tired. I'm tired of pain. This is 2020. Enough is enough.
And a good evening to you. I'm Craig Melvin. For more than 2 weeks now, Americans of all colors have filled the streets of this country protesting the death of yet another unarmed black man killed at the hands of police. The images are as heartbreaking as they are poignant. But out of the cries for justice, we have seen some change. For instance, in Minneapolis, they've banned the use of chokeholds. They've also done that in Washington, D.C., Denver, Chicago as well. Mayors across the country coming together to create working groups now to combat racism and police reform. To say the least, this flashpoint has had a devastating impact on communities of color. Devastating. The world is watching. History is recording. This week's cover of The New Yorker features an illustration called Say Their Names. It's by Kadir Nelson. It's a representation of, quote, the unnamed millions of black enslaved in America. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Eric Garner, and the latest, Rayshard Brooks, have something in common with all of us. They were someone's child. And that's where we start this evening, continuing this national conversation with the parents of children who are growing up black in America. I'm joined now by Ron Mitchell and Ebony Gates from Chicago, Illinois. They're the parents of 5-year-old twin boys. Good to see both of you. Also, Jessica and Kimry Gauthier, the parents of a 9-year-old son and a 7-year-old daughter. Thank you both for being with me as well. Ron, I'm going to start with you. You're a 6'7", 250-pound Division I basketball player. You went to Harvard, but your personal success hasn't really seemed to matter in the times that you've been racially profiled. Talk to me a little bit about your experience with police as you've watched this protest grow literally right outside your Chicago home.
Yeah, I think it's often a misconception just because you come from a certain background or you've achieved certain types of professional or academic success that you may not have had these types of interactions with the police. And that's one thing that I'm always trying to impress upon my friends, my white friends, that I've been stopped unfairly by the police. I have a fear when I'm in the presence of a number of police officers. It's just this inherent sort of fear that you freeze up because you don't know how a policeman may respond to you, particularly as a very tall and can be considered intimidating black man.
Ebony, you, as I understand it, are from the Rio, Virginia, as they call it, rural southwestern Virginia. Growing up, you saw a KKK march once or twice, friends using slurs in your presence. How do you talk to your boys about growing up black in this country, using your experiences growing up black in this country?
I started off in New Jersey in a very, very diverse neighborhood, a diverse school, had not had any experiences where I felt different. We all were different colors and had different religions, and that was fine. And then, yes, we moved to Virginia when I became 12, and I was trying to have a slumber party, and parents called my mother and said, "I'm sorry, our kids can't come." And that was the first time I'd really experienced something. And it kind of, I was there for 5 years, took an emotional toll on me, a long-term toll. And as I think about our boys, I look, this question of racism isn't something that is happening for people now just because something is happening on TV and we're covering it. It's something that my boys have been talking about and have noticed since they were 3 and 4 years old. So we're doing our best to make sure that we instill the values that we have and want for ourselves and our children, that they're empathetic, that they're good citizens, that they can talk to us, showing them that they can advocate for themselves. We help try and teach them that. Helping them understand, consumable bites about what's going on when they do ask questions, not giving them too much. But it's not too early to have the conversation, so it started.
Even at 5, even at 5.
At 3, I took our boys to a Martin Luther King program at the Children's Museum here. It was supposed to be for 2 to 5-year-olds. And it was a good program, but it was a lot more than I expected. They confronted black and white and the problems. They made him cross a picket line. One of our children, it takes a little longer to get it. The other child, Trace, started crying immediately and just said, what's going on? Why can't I play with white kids? And about a month later, the other child, who I wasn't sure if he understood or not, we were on a bus. And he said, we're not supposed to be on a bus with those people because we're brown. So they've been trying to figure this out for a while.
Jessica, let me turn to you here for a moment, because as we know, so much of the success that black children and families have in this country, it's largely based on zip code, where you were born, literally where you were born. You live in Tennessee, and you recently relocated for diversity. You say that you constantly felt like an anomaly. You would walk into a restaurant or a store and you could hear the silence. For folks who aren't familiar with what you're talking about, explain that for us.
I talked about, I said there's an episode of Blackish that explains that phenomenon exactly, where you kind of constantly feel like you're on a show, like you're always on. So you want your kids to be perfect. You want them to be dressed perfect. You want them to say the right things. You don't want them to dance too much. You don't want them to talk too much. So we kind of always, we were doing it unnaturally. We didn't even really think about that's the kind of life that we were living. And then as we started traveling more recently, we were like, gosh, I feel like we're putting on kind of a show, at home. Like we always feel like we're just trying to make sure we're doing the right thing. Just in general, like he talked about earlier, we went to college, we got married, we had kids, we checked off all the boxes that you would say make a successful American family, but then yet every day we would constantly feel like we weren't doing enough, or we weren't saying the right things, or we weren't, I don't know, it's just a pressure that we felt. So we recently just moved back to his hometown, which is a military base that is kind of a utopia for diversity, where, our neighbors are Black, white, Asian, Indian, and all in the same neighborhood, not just diverse in the city and everybody goes in their own little boxes. It's just, the fabric of the city. And with something that was really important to him growing up. And I had that when I grew up, and we just decided as family, as parents, this is something that we need to give our kids. And we just wanted them to have that too.
You said something that resonated with me. I've got a 6-year-old boy and a 3-year-old daughter, and you go out sometimes, and they look, depends on who you talk to. They either look Black or they look racially ambiguous. And I'm always struck when a stranger will say to me, "Oh, your kids are so well behaved."
Yeah,
and that they probably wouldn't say that if there were 2 white kids sitting there who are the same age. Exactly. It's like, do you not expect my kids to be well behaved?
Exactly.
Yeah. So we dealt with that a lot. We always joke with our friends, we would go to a store, Target, or a restaurant or something like that, and we'll get that oh my God, your kids are so well behaved, they're so well spoken. And I'm like, yeah, but they're not doing anything crazy. They're not out here building a a small model airplane in the middle of the store, or, you know, or solving world peace in the middle of the store. I mean, they're just being well-behaved kids. And I do feel a lot of it comes from not expecting Black kids to behave like that, because they get a stigma of being loud and ignorant and, you know, over the top and just bad in general. So we always said, like, we felt like unicorns walking into stores.
Especially a family of four.
Yeah, so it's mom, dad, brother, sister, and people look at us like, oh my God, it's a whole brown family together.
And the dog,
and they're all dressed well and well behaved, and they can speak. And so we really didn't, you know, want that feeling for them. And and we've explained it to like some of our white friends, you know, back in Knoxville and that stuff, and they would look at us like, really? And, you know, because they don't get it, you know, they don't think about it. Just think about us like just a regular family. They love us. But after a while, you keep getting that. You're like, look, man, I get it. Like, you know, our kids are cute, but it's okay.
Yeah, they're special, but I mean, you don't have to point it out all the time.
Yeah.
They speak so well. They're so well spoken, as Chris Rock used to say. Stand by for me a second, guys. Ebony, Ron, Kimry, Jessica, don't go anywhere. I want to continue this conversation in just a moment. We're going to talk about what it means to prepare your children to interact in a world that has at times been unjust and in some cases deadly to them.
Hands at 10 and 2, no sudden moves, eyes forward, yes officer, no officer. You know, act like you have some manners, be professional, keep it to the facts. And what's the most tiresome about it is you don't have the conversation just once, you're always having the conversation. Because the first time you have the conversation, it starts with something like, I don't expect you to understand anything that I'm about to tell you, but I would be irresponsible if we didn't have this conversation. So I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say it again, and then I'm going to tell you what I told you, and then we'll have it again. And at some point, you will remind me that we had this conversation, and you'll tell me, now I know what you were talking about. There are some things that you're going to have to do differently, or that you can't do that your friends do.
You're watching NBC News Now. We've got some breaking news.
If they do go back to their jobs, they want to make sure that they are protected.
It's news made for your streaming world. Live weekdays starting at 6 a.m. Eastern.
Among the chaos, that I found a father trying to teach his son about peace.
We don't have to retaliate with anger. We retaliate with love. That's why we're down here. There's always another way. So that's all I want him to see.
Today, the World Health Organization officially calling it a pandemic. None of us is unaffected by its impact.
We're going to try everything that we can to keep life as normal as possible for everybody.
If it gets into an environment like this, it's going to spread like rapid fire.
We're going to build this economy back stronger than ever before.
There's a number of things I'd be doing that are not being done right now.
Coming in November, people are going to be voting not for a person, but for stability.
I have to plan a funeral. How is this going to work?
You don't prepare for giving birth in a pandemic.
The importance of music is to keep our spirits up.
I'm Tremaine Lee. Join me as we go into America to hear from everyday people grappling with the most pressing issues of our time.
We'd like to think that we live in some sort of post-racial America. We're reminded time and time again that we do not.
Chanel, I reached out to you after I watched the mayor of Atlanta act as a mom trying to raise her son, and I think about you and your kids.
I remember her coming home saying, why don't I have a ponytail like the white girls? It's okay to notice that you're different. You just have to not feel less than. That's my thing.
I cherish the fact that we can have these discussions. I feel safe talking about this with you guys.
You're watching NBC News Now. We've got some breaking news.
We actually saw a large convoy of the National Guard come through here.
It's news made for your streaming world. Live weekdays starting at 6 a.m. Eastern.
a virus that knows no borders.
A real catastrophe happening here in Brazil before our very eyes.
Our global fight against it unites us.
Here in Mexico City, the people I spoke to said if they don't work, they're not going to be able to feed their families.
Our NBC News and Sky teams are on the ground, learning from where it's been.
The South Korean government is bringing students back over the next couple of weeks in stages.
So that you can better understand how it will impact us here.
Life across Italy is back to normal. It just doesn't look like the same normal as before.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
These are the United States, a united people with a united purpose.
The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave.
A great people has been moved to defend a great nation.
All of us can extend a hand to those in need.
I'm Brandon O'Doy, and I'm the father of two sons, a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old. And I talked to my 6-year-old, and I wanted to try to begin to open up the dialogue and explain to him exactly what's going on even right now in these United States. And he participated in a Black History program, and so I thought that might be a way to get in to helping him to understand what exactly is currently going on, because during that program, he didn't want to participate in the middle passage portion, which of course was the beginning of the program. And I said, son, do you remember the part that you didn't want to play in Black History? He said, yeah, Dad, I remember. I said, why didn't you want to participate in that? He said, because, it was just too scary. I didn't really want to be beaten and something terrible happened. I said, son, something terrible has happened in Minnesota, and it happened to a young man. And I explained to him it was because he was taken advantage of by someone in a position of power. And this was a conversation that just led to a lot of questions that I just could not answer, and find reasonable ways not to go too far with a 6-year-old, and especially a 2-year-old who probably didn't understand much of what I was saying. But I became very angry and started thinking, why am I even having to do this? And that's just the frustration of the times that we live in right now. And I just am kind of numb to the fact that these are the times that we are trying to prepare our sons for, and we really just don't know the way.
And welcome back to our special Growing Up Black Families, Confronting Racism. That was Brandon O'Doy there, another father struggling to understand the senseless deaths of another unarmed Black man in this country. We are back now with our panel, if you will. Ebony and Ron are back with me. Kimry also back. Kimry and Jessica. Ron, let me start with you. How, in this moment, do you prepare your twin boys there in Chicago? What advice do you have for fathers who might be watching, or sons who might be watching or listening tonight?
Sure. I think it's important to know what we're preparing them for. It's more than just interactions with police officers. It's for interactions with anybody and any organization in a position of authority. And that might be a school, a teacher, a religious institution, it might be whomever it is. And so we try to start with one, informing them, right? Even at 5 years old, it's important to talk about these issues, but to break them down and to be age appropriate, to put it into digestible pieces. I think it's also important as we think about it, not to use these all universal qualifiers. You can't say all police officers. You can't say all white. Very, very effective. Right? And that's part of the information piece. And then it's preparing them. It's preparing them for these interactions that really impact their emotional health. We had one of our young boys on his 5th birthday party come home and start crying. And he was crying because he was saying that all the kids with the flat hair were playing with each other and they weren't playing with him. And I said, flat hair? What's flat hair? He goes, well, my brother and I, we have curly hair.
Crinkly hair.
Crinkly hair. And then I knew, they're talking about the white kids and the black kids. And then he said that thing that every parent or Black parent hates to hear. I wish I had flat hair. And your stomach sinks. And so it's important that you explain to people and these young children at this very early age that it's not necessarily a function of what you look like, what you do, or some people may treat you differently because of that, but we can't group all people similarly. There are some great people out there. There are kids, because we have to continue to provide that hopefulness in our children. That is critical. And if they don't feel emotionally safe, if they don't feel physically safe, then they won't feel hopeful. And once you lose that hopefulness, you can spiral in many different directions.
That's fantastic advice. Kimry, there are conversations that, as we know, Black parents have to have with their kids that other families just don't have to have. What intellectual armor are you suiting your kids up with?
A big thing, so our son is 9 now. Our daughter is 7 going on 8. And I've already had a conversation with my son and my daughter about, even as far, I tell them, like, you sadly, you have to work harder. You have to be different. You have to, you not get away with as much, because you will eventually, there's probably going to be someone who's going to look at you because of the color of your skin and treat you differently. You're not going to be able to get by with some of the just regular things kids do as far as behavior goes and that stuff. And I think it's crazy to say that we have to have those conversations, but the biggest thing is just like Ron said, like just making sure that when things happen, we explain to them, tell them that not all police are bad or not all white people are bad, because that mindset is the same thing that we're trying to battle, right? Against us. Because you have people out there who think that we're all bad because of the color of our skin. So we don't want that to be with our children. And we want them to be able to pick friends and be around people who feel the same way they do. So a lot of it is just breaking that down and sadly having that conversation like, hey, because you are Black, because you have, brown skin, you're going to be looked at differently sometimes. And it's not fair right now, and hopefully it changes by the time he gets to a teenage age. But right now, those are the facts. So just constantly, just having those talks with him whenever I can, whenever I feel it's appropriate. Our oldest, he feels a lot. He's pretty in tune with that kind of stuff. So we try to give him a little bit of information, not too much, because he will take it and he will kind of, he'll take it, he'll kind of run with it. It is heavy on him. He can kind of feel the room as far as emotions and that stuff go. So that's the biggest thing there. Just continue to tell him, just like, hey, just be the best you can be. And then we pray about a lot of things too. So that's just something that we focus on as well, prayer as well. So I'm just trying to make sure that he stays in the right circles when he gets older.
Ebony, this is a conversation that we want people to continue having in their homes. That's one reason that we're having this conversation right now. Knowing that this conversation is going to continue, where do you think it should go? What do you think it should include?
For us as Black parents, I think it's important to be mindful that our children are going to be faced with a number of issues, and they may not even know how to speak about them or exactly what's happening. So making sure that they feel safe and there's a place to go and to speak. One of our kids, right after watching the riots outside of the window, said, "I just need a hug." And we knew what it was, and we talked about things later. But we talk about even more so, being part of these kids' lives, being, with their peers, be they Black, be they white especially, getting to know those families, talking to them about what we're up against, and, whatever they're saying, their children are seeing and saying and doing, and how they can help support my kids. There's an article I keep looking at, and I keep posting it, and it says, when will you stop thinking my kid is cute, and when will he become a threat? And we want to help the parents that are in our kids' lives and the children in their lives not be afraid to see color, not be afraid to ask respectful questions, but just we want them to have good friends and have support.
I have so enjoyed this. I've actually learned a fair amount in just the last few minutes from the four of you. Thank you so much. I wish we had more time. Ebony Gates, Ron Mitchell, and Kimry, and Jessica Gaudier. Thank you. A big thanks to all of you for your time tonight. Coming up, my colleague Tremaine Lee and I will talk about how we have been covering this moment in history as journalists, but also as fathers.
You're watching NBC News Now. We've got some breaking news.
If they do go back to their jobs, they want to make sure that they are protected.
It's news made for your streaming world. Live weekdays starting at 6 a.m. Eastern.
It is said there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. Perhaps the time has come to fully realize the dream upon which this great country was founded: equal justice under the law.
You're watching NBC News Now. We've got some breaking news.
We actually saw a large convoy of the National Guard come through here.
It's news made for your streaming world. Live weekdays starting at 6 a.m. Eastern.
Introducing Peacock. What's Peacock? This is Peacock.
Let's go!
It's streaming, launching, premiering. It's TV, movies, exclusive originals, original characters.
Duh.
It's sports.
Breaking news.
Docs, tunes.
Wait, there's more.
More?
Yes, more.
Tons. It's quick stuff, binge stuff, tough stuff, love stuff. It's trending, mind-bending. It's late night, early morning.
Good morning.
It's you see this, you remember that, you watched every single one of those? It's for you, for ew, for aw. It's Chrisley, Pawnee, Monkey, E.T., and it's free.
Free.
Who's with me?
That's Peacock. That's who. That's what. That's why.
Come on.
Boom. Mic drop.
You can't not watch.
We'd like to think that we live in some sort of post-racial America. We're reminded time and time again that we do not.
Chanel, I reached out to you after I watched the mayor of Atlanta act as a mom trying to raise her son, and I think about you and your kids.
I remember her coming home saying, why don't I have a ponytail like the white girls? It's okay to notice that you're different. You just have to not feel less than. That's my thing.
I cherish the fact that we can have these discussions. I feel safe talking about this with you guys.
8 is old enough. It's not old enough, but it's necessary because I can't hide the entire world from him. So I'm starting to have conversations with an 8-year-old boy who would love to remain innocent, and I would love to remain innocent. I have to start preparing him for things that you shouldn't have to prepare an 8-year-old for. It makes the joy of fatherhood a lot more complicated.
As a journalist, you never want to become part of this story under any circumstances, but this one feels personal to so many of us, including to my colleague and friend, MSNBC correspondent Tremaine Lee. We are both, as they say, girl dads. Tremaine joins me now. And you know, we're no longer worrying about just men. We're also worried about our daughters as well, young ladies. We've been on the ground together, you and I, reporting on this one, but so many shootings before, so many deaths before. I have to ask you from your perspective, why does what we are seeing feel different right now? Are you encouraged that there's going to be some real and lasting change from all of this?
Wow, Craig, that's a lot in that question. On one hand, the idea of encouragement, I'll answer that now. We've seen the pendulum shift. When there is great progress, there is always a backlash. So I'm not necessarily encouraged. I think we're seeing signs of things that we haven't seen in generations in terms of a collective sense of wanting to move this country forward. But as you mentioned, our daughters, you know, our black girls are not immune to the violence of the state, the violence of the system, or violence in communities at all. So we also need to redouble our efforts to make sure that our little girls are fortified. And I've been listening to the conversation you've been having with folks all night, right? And it's about the talk, preparing our young men, especially, and our children to move through a world that is sometimes hostile. Their physical selves we care about. We both looked in a mother's eyes or a father's eyes whose child left and never came back. And we don't want that to be our child. But I think it's also so important to fortify our children emotionally. Right, Craig? I think back to when I was maybe 6 or 7 years old, and I was sitting with my mother, and we watched on the news the Philadelphia Police Department drop bombs on Osage Avenue in Philadelphia, a black community, and having this conversation about how unjust and unfair the world is. But she always buoyed that with I am somebody. She'd say I am, and I would say somebody, and filled me with a sense of pride, filled me with a sense of self. So when we're navigating these spaces, we have to make sure our children's physical well-being is taken care of, but their emotional well-being as well. And as we're in the business of trading on news and trading on these images. And so I've tried to make sure I contextualize this stuff for my daughter, make sure that she knows that, even going way back, they had to take the strongest among us, the best among us, those who taught white folks how to plant rice, how to be craftsmen in different ways, right? Reminding her that even though the world is unjust, it has absolutely nothing to do with you. And I think it does get hard when we see the spectacle of black death as we've seen it. And we see black men being shot in the back on camera. We see black men being kneeled upon until they take their last breaths, right? It's hard to navigate with little minds. But when we start early, and I think we frame it up right? We frame it up who they are and whose they are and the strength they have inside of them. It makes it just a little bit easier, Craig.
Tremaine, I know your daughter, she's a little older than my girl. My girl's 3, your daughter's 7. She'll be 8 this fall. Are you already exposing her to some of what we are experiencing as journalists? I mean, do you let her watch the news? Or if the news is on, are you trying to explain what's happening, or do you let her ask the questions?
Yeah. I try to, give it in age-appropriate doses, but we started very young. Matter of fact, just to rewind a little bit, we celebrated her 7th birthday last year in Ghana. And we were in the slave dungeons together. And she stood in the front of the group as the guide explained how people were captured and how they lived and how they died and how they were transported, right? We've had these conversations a lot. And now, of course, because of COVID-19, a lot of the work is happening at home, right? So she hears me having these conversations. I don't want to necessarily shield her from the realities of life. I want to arm her with the full context, right? So she asked questions. It was so interesting. Just 3 or 4 days ago, we were watching the news, and there was this woman, I'm not sure where she was from, but she was explaining why young people are breaking windows, and she explained the frustration and anger. But she said, they're lucky that we're asking for equality and not vengeance, right? They're lucky we're asking for equality. And my daughter looked at me, and she said, Daddy, we're only asking for equality. We don't want to hurt anyone. And that was a moment there saying, yes, right? The long line from way back of black folks fighting for their rights, forcing America to be the best democracy it could be each and every turn, as black folks are doing now with the help of some allies, right? Equality, the fight. So I think I'm always trying to make sure it's framed up properly so that she knows it's not because of her, that this is an extension that goes way back in terms of fighting for equality and democracy in America. And she gets it. She gets it. Again, she's only 8 years old, going on 18 years old, Craig. But she's starting to the machine and the cogs are starting to turn. And it's almost a joy to me to see her awakening. And even though this is tough news and it's hard, it's life and death and brutality and systems and these big ideas, in her mind, again, when she says, Daddy, we're asking for equality, not vengeance. So I try to give her what we can because we have to arm them. She's going to be a young woman someday, 18, 19, 20 years old, going through college, going through the workplace, engaging with white friends. She's going to have to grapple with this no matter what. So I figure at least arm her and inoculate her to some degree.
Well, your daughter will most certainly be armed. Tremaine Lee, I always enjoy our conversations. Love you, brother. Thank you for your time this evening. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, be sure to subscribe to Tremaine's podcast. It's called Into America. He hosts it, and it's available wherever you get your podcasts. I want to thank all of you for participating in this conversation with us. I'm Craig Melvin, and I want to leave you with this special message from singer, songwriter, and perhaps her most important title in this moment, Mother. Here's Angie Stone.
What's up, y'all? It's your girl, Angie Stone. Let me just say thank you and make you aware that we're approaching the 20th year of the recording as one of the most prolific songs that happens to fit our agenda yet again today. 20 years ago, we recorded the song Brother. Here it is 20 years later, and it's still carrying the banner of relevancy. I just want to say to my people, stand for something or continue to fall for anything. Stop the killing. It is not necessary. Stop the hate. It is not necessary. Stop the slaughtering. We can do better. Family, Friends, brothers, sisters, let's come together as one. We have an agenda to form peace.
To hurt you, I want you to know that I'm here for you forever true. Cause you're my black brother, strong brother, and there is no one above you. I want you to know that I'm here for you forever true. He's misunderstood. Some say that he